Welcome back to the class, everyone. Many of you have just unlocked Jabba, some of you are about to unlock Jabba, and even others are considering getting the Lightspeed bundle in order to unlock Jabba. And I've already seen a lot of questions go around, both my Discord server as well as Twitch streams, about what team comps should we be trying to build around Hutt Cartel, what does the overall modding need to look like on that team, and then probably most importantly, what order do the Zetas need to be applied in? So we will be covering all of that and more in today's video. So first up, we have to talk about Zetas, and the way that I've kind of structured this is we want to work our way to from the top down as far as overall structure goes, with the exception of Embo, which we'll talk about towards the end, because his Zeta, it really does depend on how you're going to use him as versus how important it is. And the must-have Zetas on the team, like if you don't have any Zetas, and when you do get them, this is where they have to go. I would really strongly argue that the first one actually needs to go into Boosh. And I know that sounds crazy because she's not the Galactic Legend, so you would think that, oh, you need to apply all 6 to Jabba the Hutt before you go over to Boosh. And the answer to that is no, don't do that. The issue, or the reason why, is because her Zeta on the Fearless ability, at the very end it says, if all allies were Hutt Cartel at the start of the battle, which you should be doing, enemies with Deadly Bluff can't attack at a turn. Deadly Bluff is a condition she gives to the enemy team for 3 turns at the very beginning. This is huge for stopping a lot of wildly budget counters out there. Jabba the Hutt is one of the best defensive teams in the game, and you should be using something very strong like Supreme Leader Kylo Ren or JMK to have to take it down. If you do not have the Zeta that stops the attacking out of turn, you are going to start getting hit up with things like CLS, who can just completely barrage the team right off the bat. That will be very sad. You will be sad. I will be sad. Just don't do it. So first, Zeta really has to go to her. There are actually several other teams that get or become a lot more viable when attacking out of turn. CLS just happens to be one of the most budget ones out there. Next up is going to be our good friend Jabba the Hutt himself, and obviously he has 6 Zetas, so I'm going to be giving you them in order of importance. The first one that you really must have is going to be the leadership ability. Now, the leadership ability, really all it does is add the ability to get contract, and then it also gives this contract. And the contract itself from Jabba really isn't super amazing and all the things. Like, you get some stats, you get some mastery, you get some recovery. It's good. You want to have it. But the real reason why the leadership is #1 on the list is because when you get contract, you're also unlocking every single individual character's contract. Meaning, all this fancy stuff that Boosh wants to do with thermal detonators, you don't get if you can't get to payout from that contract. Chrysanthemum can't get damage immunity from it. Boba Fett can't get his bonus turn. So there are so many things with your kits that are being left on the table if you don't have the leadership at a bare minimum. And then after that, the second most important Zeta for Jabba the Hutt, I would say, is going to be, oh, not you, Crumb's Revenge. And this is pretty important because if you don't have this, you just don't have an AoE dispel. In fact, you really don't have a whole lot of dispels at all if you don't even have Embo built up on top of that. So adding that along with the buff immunity, which cannot be dispelled or resisted, which is a really big deal for a lot of the counters out there, plus some other things to do with ultimate charge, which are very important. So overall, again, reviewing most important Zetas for the team has to be Boosh's Fearless here. And then on top of that, we also want to take note Jabba's leadership as well as Crumb's Revenge as #1 and 2. Now, after you apply all those 3 and the team is essentially functional, doing what it's supposed to do, it's not going to be as good as it could be. And after that, the Zetas we want to look at, and probably not in any particular order, is going to be Illicit Business. This is going to allow for more ultimate charge and actually going to increase the probability of a timeout if your opponent is able to kill most of Jabba's team because of their protection recovery. But yeah, 6% ultimate charge is a big deal. And then on top of it, the Illustrious as well. This is going to really hamper any enemy team that wants to be doing funny turn meter shenanigans. Turn meter is really kind of hard to use against Jabba in general, but this kind of helps you catch up and stop anybody who tries to do anything funny for the most part. So overall, those are going to be your number 3 and 4 Zetas. Now, the Zetas that you can really leave for last, they are good. You do want them. They do complete the team, but it's going to be Jabba the Hutt's Galactic Legend, which this is a little bit weird. for most Galactic Legends, you want to prioritize this as a top 3. The reason why we don't necessarily need to do this with Jabba is because he can't be targeted while the rest of his allies are around, meaning his survivability really only matters in the case of AoEs. And while there is the possibility that Supreme Leader Kylo Ren with his AoEs can kill Jabba before Chrysanthemum or Embo, it doesn't really matter, because if SLKR already killed Boosh, the match was pretty much over. It didn't, like, SLKR is not timing out on Jabba himself. So for the most part, this is just not that important, because Jabba's overall survivability is already taken care of through other means. And then last, essentially, is going to be Crime Lord, that just gives some more buffs to these specific factions that are under him. So it's not terrible, but at the same time, it definitely can go into last or semi-last place. And then along with them, we're going to put Skiff Lando in there. It gives a bonus turn for this ability, Covert Coordination. Bonus turns are good. Not having the bonus turn doesn't completely screw counters. You still do a lot of other stuff on the team. It's one ability. It's one thing on the one ability. It's good, but it's not going to make or break most things. Now, the Zetas that you can skip for the most part are going to be found in this list. Chrysanthemum and Gamguard probably aren't even worth talking about, because anybody who did get the Lightspeed bundle for Jabba actually got these 2 Zetas for free. And while that's super cool, and I don't want to make anyone feel bad about that in any way whatsoever, the Zetas are really bad. Like, really, really bad. Gamguard, you're probably not even going to use this character in general. And then Chrysanthemum, arguably, this is one of the worst Zetas in the entire game, because it says Dismember no longer starts on cooldown, and its cooldown is reset at the start of each encounter. Jabba does that for him already. It's literally completely wasted. Now, the one thing I will say to make you feel a little bit better is if you do want to go for his Omicron, and we will address that later, then you had to have the Zeta in the first place. So really, actually, it might be a very good gain for you. So that'll be instead. We'll talk about them more with this Omicron. Boba Fett's Zeta really does kind of suck. All it allows him to do is get full protection on a finishing blow, and once upon a time, full protection recovery on a character was a flex. It really isn't anymore. You don't need it. Greedos, I don't even have it. That should tell you how good it is. And then Mob Enforcer doesn't even have one. I'm not quite sure why we've included her on this list to begin with. So overall, that is the Zeta coverage. Now, I will include Embo in here. I realize he's not in the pack, nor is he required for Jabba. But if you want to take the Jabba team to its fullest potential, Embo is the best 5th on the team. We'll talk about that in team comps here in a second. But what Embo brings to the table really is going to revolve around the TW Omicron. This thing is cracked. Number 1, you have an Omicron on a Galactic Legend team in general, so you know that its long-term viability is going to be around for a while. And then on top of it, what it's actually doing for the team is very relevant, and I believe it's still currently bugged and actually doesn't go away after he dies, at least in the current match, like most uniques are supposed to. It just adds a bunch of max protection, damage, 30% defense, and 5% turn when a bounty hunter ally receives damage while debuffed. Like, there's a lot of things in here that are actually really important and really relevant. That being said, much similar to how we talked about Chrysanthemum earlier, you can't get to the Omicron if you don't have the Zeta. So if your guild really is pushing for this to be a TW option on defense, and I would encourage that for those of you who are TW officers out there, then it really is going to get bumped up to here, like Zeta-wise. Like, you know, make sure you get the Boosh and Jabba's first 2, and then Embo and that next one can probably go in this slot here. If you don't have TW as a priority, but you still want to use Embo in the team, which I would encourage, then it probably falls somewhere here. Because not being crit, the really only thing that does is it slows down SLKR's ult by a little bit. So not a huge thing, but might cause some issues here and there. So that is overall our priority for Zetas. I do want to talk about comps next, because we essentially just touched on it. Jabba is actually really simple when it comes to overall comps. For 3v3, this is your team. Boosh is obviously the main source of damage through thermals, as well as stopping assists that we talked about before. Chrysanthemum is your take that keeps Boosh from dying. Jabba's your leader. Done deal. 3v3, easy peasy. Now for 5v5 for both TW and GAC, most of the time, this is the ideal comp. We already kind of talked about why. Embo does add some fun things to the team. And if you don't have Embo built up because you don't have Lord Vader, or didn't get the pack, or just didn't farm him up for whatever reason, you can put Boba Fett in as a 5th, and he does fine. This team is not garbage by any standard of the imagination. And on top of that, there actually is even a really good argument for Boba as a 5th on the team if you suspect your opponent will use Night Sisters, as if he gets a lucky execute off, they don't get to come back. They're dead. They're permanently dead, in fact. So that can be one way to stop things overall. And it's not an insta-kill ability, which means that Marin's insta-defeat immunity will not block it. So overall, comps, really simple, not a lot there to write home about. Now let's go back and talk about Omicrons a little bit, because we talked about them earlier as well. I already talked about the TW Omicron to begin with. It's amazing. It's one of the best TW Omicrons that exist out here right now. Again, just because of what it's able to do and the way that it's kind of currently bugged to still have lasting effects even after he's dead, at least in that immediate battle. The two ones that are going to kind of land in the okay territory are going to be Chrysanthemum and Skifflando. Chrysanthemum really isn't that amazing. All it's going to do is give him a lot of protection and then give his enemies a lot of negative potency. That's really not going to hard stomp any single counter like Embo might, but at the same time, it does hurt. Like if Afra's going up against the team and she tries to apply data right away, and the negative potency, like that can have an effect. Or if you're trying to use Asajj and apply healing immunity onto the team, like having negative potency is bad. So it's not garbage, but at the same time, you can probably do without it if you are short on Omicrons. Skifflandos is kind of fall into the same category. The stats are nice, but at the same time, Jabba is probably going to do everything that he's going to do with Embocron, not really needing to have to interact with the Skiffcron all that much. And then last and definitely least is going to be Boosh and Gamguard. And this is important because you're going to notice that a lot of players out there, maybe a lot of players you look up to from a roster perspective, are going to have this Omicron. It's for raids. Was used in a raid that no longer has Mark III currency for raid. So just don't do it. Like you're just never going to have the opportunity to use it, or at least as things are currently right now. And then Gamguards is for TB. And quite frankly, if you're going to do any TB Omicron, it should probably be one involved in like Cal's special mission or something like that. It really shouldn't be on Gamguard. Like Jabba does fine in TB without it. You don't need Gamguards Omicron. It's fine. And now, lastly, we do need to talk a little bit about modding. I'm going to be talking about these characters specifically because, as we reviewed in the comp area, you're really only going to be swapping between these 6. Luckily, most of the characters are fairly straightforward in their modding. Jabba, the name of the game is speed and survivability. He does have one move that can damage, but for the most part, between his Rancor insta-kill as well as Boosh's thermals all over the place, your damage is mostly already taken care of. You don't need to mod him anyway like that. So a speed set, a speed primary, and then a health primary, and a health primary with a health set is generally the best way to go. There have been some instances where tenacity has been nice because you can still like AoE ability block him and stuff like that. But for the most part, I like health modding more because you have a higher likelihood of timing a team out that can kill all of the sides but not kill Jabba himself. Specifically, Night Sisters, who can do that from time to time. Now, next up, Boosh is also going to be fairly straightforward, although there is more than one method of modding her. I prefer the speed and potency method. Again, the damage in the team is already pretty much taken care of between Jabba's insta-kill, thermal detonators, and then even the last 3 characters we'll look at. Boosh herself doesn't actually need to do that much damage. She just needs to get out thermals as fast as possible. So obviously a speed set with a speed primary on the arrow. I do like the second potency set as well as a potency primary on the cross. I do prefer offense primary on her triangle, and the reason for that is we kind of want either offense or crit damage on triangle normally, and the reason why we don't want crit damage is because she's a special damage attacker, and special damage attackers' critical chance is typically in the toilet. Like hers is really, really low, and the team itself doesn't have a whole lot of ways to boost up critical chance. She does get some more from the boosts and mastery, but it's typically not enough to get her into that safe percent of like 80-90 range. So overall, offense primary is probably fine there. I do like health here just because of the protection up mechanics that Jabba has with turn meter and whatnot. So for the most part, that's really her role, is to be quick and then apply as many thermal detonators as possible. And you might think that 200% potency is overkill. It honestly isn't nowadays with some of the Night Sister counters out there that involve Marin not getting thermal detonators. Next up is going to be Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum actually is one of the few characters in game that genuinely benefits from a ton of tenacity. And there's a few reasons for it, but one of the main ones is Lord Vader to be able to consistently, successfully beat up on Jabba, him or Maul need to be able to land buff immunity on Chrysanthemum, get past, and immediately kill Boosh. If you have him with loads of tenacity, so all 3 tenacity sets as well as a tenacity primary here, you can get him above 170%, then you can pretty much full stop any of those buff immunities from Lord Vader and Maul, assuming those characters aren't modded for potency, which I don't think they ever are. Beyond that, I prefer protection on his 3 remaining primaries, and the reason for that is he gets a nice chunk of protection, whether it be from Omicron or from his own Omicron here. If you don't have either, then you could opt for health. That's probably fine. But at the same time, I mean, there's some max health damage that I actually don't like him to fall to between Lord Vader's dots, or even awkwardly enough, some exposes from the Afro team. So typically, tenacity and protection is the way to go. He does not need to be that fast. Again, as always, when I show speed mods, you don't need to get characters to these speed thresholds. Just try to get his tenacity up, and then I guess defense percent secondary would also be nice if you have to. Now, as for the rest of the attackers, they're going to be fairly straightforward as well. Boba Fett himself, crit damage as well as potency pretty much gets the job done. The reason why I like crit damage on him is because he is a physical damage attacker, so his crit chance is naturally very, very high. You can see we're already bordering 100% with pretty much no intentional modding at all. I do like the potency cross and set on him, just to kind of get him near the 100% range for the ability block that he has, as well as the healing immunity. Not hard required to get him to do what he needs to do, but it is nice, and you don't really need the crit chance there anyways. Now, you can use an offense set instead of a crit damage set if you just have a surplus of those, but for the most part, I think in game, more characters often than not need offense over crit damage. With his crit chance being so high, it just kind of made sense to give it to him. Next up is Embo, and the name of the game with Embo is going to be protection. We already talked a little bit about his TW Omicron, giving him bonus max protection, but he's also able to use it as damage when we look into the rest of his kit. His hat throw here, this attack deals bonus damage equal to 35% of Embo's max protection, then he loses the protection. The nice thing is, though, once he gets his contract, he'll actually have a way to get it back, where we deal physical damage and recover protection equal to the damage dealt. So when we look at the primaries here, you'll notice protection, 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 protection. And then I went for a crit damage and a crit chance set on him for kind of a similar reason to Boba, being that his crit chance is just very high naturally. Not quite as high as Boba's, so we're not going to have like a weird secondary like we had in Boba. We're just going to go for a very standard crit chance. Again, speed isn't crazy. He does have ways to get his own bonus turns, and then he even has ways to boost his offense and crit chance depending on how much protection he has as well. And then last but not least is going to be Skiff Lando. Skiff Lando, again, being an attacker, we're actually going to be focusing on offense rather than crit damage on him. And the reason why is just because his crit chance is pretty low. He is a physical attacker, so he's going to have that 56% chance. And then on top of it, he actually gets another 20% chance from one of Bush's uniques. But for the most part, crit damage triangle here just because we got him to that 76% range with the crit chance set. But I did want to keep the offense set as well as some offense primaries, or rather this one offense primary on him, just because it's not going to be as guaranteed as, say, for the other two characters. Health over here. Speed is not crazy important on Lando. Honestly, when we look at speed from a kind of a bird's eye view up here, Jabba the Hutt, Bush are going to be the most important. The remaining 4 characters here can actually be pretty slow. 10 to 15 speed secondaries on each of them should be enough. Again, that is going to depend on your overall mod depth. If you can't get that high, it's also fine. The ones that really need to be fast are Jabba and Bush to be able to do what they need to do. So that is going to cover modding and really the rest of the video, as we've already covered comps, Omis, as well as Zetas. One last thing that I will mention that we kind of mentioned in passing is that if you're wanting to know where to use this team with this modding and these Omicrons and Zetas, it is primarily a defensive team. It can beat a lot of stuff on offense, but for the most part, it has been a pain to be able to take down one on defense in GAC or TW. So that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any comments or questions, let me know in the comment section. And as always, stay awesome, guys.